Hello and welcome to the Business of Data podcast. My name is Catherine King and I'll be your host. Welcome to season 3. It's absolutely lovely to have you joining us. In this series, we will be talking to executives and thought leaders from a range of industries, departments and functions, all about their passions, experiences and challenges within data and analytics. Let's go ahead and dive straight into today's episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Business of Data podcast. This week we are zeroing in on adapting departments to analytics, specifically zeroing in on the user case of the relationship between auditing and analytics. Now, to talk us through this brilliant topic, we have brought in Pranav Kapoor, who's the Global Head of Audit Data Analytics for Manulife. Now, if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Pranav before, now just a few intro facts. As I say, he has been within Manulife as their Global Head of Decision Analytics for Audit Innovation since November 2019. Prior to this, he's worked in a number of really well-known brands, including EY, EXL, and American Express as well. Now, if you can't find him at his work desk, I'm sure you'll find him spending time with his young son. Pranav, it's lovely to have you joining us today.
Thank you, Catherine. Good to be here too.
Super. Now, as is a pod tradition, I'll start with a nosy question first. So you are based in Toronto, Canada, I believe, but previous you were based in New Delhi, India. So what drew you to Canada?
I guess, it was a bunch of different reasons. I wouldn't say it's one single reason really that made me take that decision. I'd worked in India and Hong Kong for a fair bit of time, and I've always been working for companies like American Express, EY, and EXL, the likes that you mentioned. And I just wanted to make sure that I did get to have some Western professional experience. It's always been offsite based in India, and the opportunity from Canada came knocking, so I just couldn't say no. And Canada seemed to be the best place to be right now with its, different cultures all blending in together.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I love that. Seizing the opportunity. What a great way to start out the podcast with such a great theme. And I know we have so many different people that listen and tune into the podcast every week. And I know there's going to be a certain number of parents. So how have you been keeping your young son occupied during the COVID era?
Yeah, no, that's a fairly interesting question. I think I should say that our son keeps both me and my wife occupied. I think that happens 24/7. And, generally, it's a typical day looks like his school starts. My wife, fortunately, helps me a lot with these things. And, she's been able to take care of his studies. In the evenings, we take him out to the park so that he can get some fresh air still. In the night, he typically ends our day with a story or two. So, the day just flies by along with, I would say, some other minor things like work, I would say. But, that's a regular day. And then on weekends, we tend to take some nature walks and at least try and spend more time as a family together. But all in all, you're right. I think time was just flying by.
Absolutely. And I think that sets the scene quite nicely for the discussion we're about to have, in a sense of seizing the moment and also going along a journey that's actually quite quick, especially in the world of data analytics. I think that's what makes it so exciting for all of us who work in that world. So set the scene for me, Pranav. What has the audit department traditionally looked like compared to now? Give us the rough evolution.
Yeah, that's a great question. Comes at a great time too. I think internal audit is, I would say at its flux at the moment across the globe. Internal audit function is one of the most critical functions, as you would imagine, in any organization, right? They are the ones who keep the risk in check, and they are the ones responsible for going back to the business and even telling them how things are at, right? Internal audit is always being involving in looking at the risk that come into a digital world right now. There's so many changes happening at any point in time. Internal audits department now have been leveraging a lot on the power of analytics. They're trying to do what more can be done through digitally to make the IA function not just a very a risk-oriented function, but also an innovation function by itself, with strong use cases on advanced analytics, robotics, RPA automation, There is a lot of work that, all of the IA departments, I would say, are working towards continuous auditing. And that just becomes one more big function that we believe is going to be one of the game changers within the audit industry.
Fantastic. Now, I mean, that's just a brilliant overview there, but what are the biggest challenges you've been working through in your role during that evolution?
Yeah, that's a great question too. The IA teams that I work for, they've always had a very strong innovation culture, and they've always brought new ways of working to the processes, with the changing world and the changing ways of business that's being there. But there's also another piece, to innovate deep and fast. That's what requires in today's. We need to drive the innovation culture and embed digital skills and knowledge to all our auditors, and not just a small team or a small part of the team that would be aware of these skills. It's very interesting to get our auditors onto a common knowledge or a common definition of what analytics is. Also get them aware of the power of analytics. I think those are the two big focus areas that we've had, at least as an internal audit business.
And I want to pick right up on that point, actually, because it's something that I've certainly seen and heard before, which is that very broad interpretation of what analytics is, as you've said. I mean, some people would look at what they're doing in Excel and call that analytics. Some people would look at what you're doing in Python and call that analytics. And there might be disagreements from either side as to which is analytics. So what have you been doing to overcome the challenge of that broad interpretation and kind of bringing everyone onto the same page and uniting under that?
Now that's one of the big things that's always been the case. I wouldn't say it's just I think you rightly said it's probably an industry-wide phenomena rather than just particular team phenomena, because analytics by itself is so broad brush that everything can be rolled up under the carpet there, or you could really get specific about it. I think one of the good things that we've done, and I would say it's really basic, is we've gone out there and we've been educating auditors and some of our other stakeholders on what we define as analytics, right? We present to them how the industry defines analytics, so there is a fair comparison that can happen.
Yeah.
Tell them about how our peers define analytics, so other companies within the insurance world, other companies within the financial world of it. And we also help them with examples on how analytics has been used within our industry, right? You could talk about broad financial services level, but also very specifically to the audit level, right? And then this has helped the auditors to come back with a clear vision of what analytics is, and at least for all of us to stand common to say this is how we would define analytics, and that just becomes much more of an easier conversation then, rather than we all figuring out our own sweet world of what we define as analytics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, it's not just specific to the department. And I mean, you could take any concept in data analytics as a wider thing. What data literacy means, what data culture means, what governance means. They are interpretable, and I think actually doing that work of finding a definition and making sure everyone runs with it is actually very important to make sure that you're starting off in the best way possible.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
You set the scene there for me perfectly. Now we know where audit has been and where you are now, but what are you looking towards? I know you mentioned there the consistent auditing rather than kind of going in one-off. So what other end goals do you have?
I think our end goal is very clear. We want to be the innovative function within the audit group. We want to be an exciting place to work, right? In my utopia, the auditors will have analytics skills, and the data analytics group, which is my group, will become an innovation function, so that you can best leverage each other's skills to that matter, right? Because then the auditors have this basic understanding or ideas on what analytics can do, and they have basic skills to go out and do that work by themselves. But when it comes to more innovative, advanced functions that have to be used, then they can leverage the team's central expertise there.
Super duper. So the end goals aren't too hard then. I love that, just being very innovative. And I think, as you say, I think there can be a bit of a perception about audit. I think it almost falls into the same bracket as governance, as information security, where it could be the department of no, the department of traditional thinking, and actually it's really a breath of fresh air to hear from you. Actually, you want to be a nice place to work, you want to be attracting talent, you want to have that innovative and flexible thinking. So I think that's really, really great to hear, and make sure that we're spreading that message on the podcast as well.
For sure.
And now, I know many departments will suffer with siloed thinking. It's something we've covered extensively on the podcast and our other formats as well. But I am keen to know, because I think you've got a bit of a story to tell of how you've been actively encouraging your team members to think from the business perspective as well, and making sure that business link is constant with the work that you guys do.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think if I leverage all my experience for the last, 10 years that I've been working within the analytics function, I can tell you that how easy it becomes for any data analytics team to become very siloed, because you're talking about people that have a very core set of expertise and they tend to work in that direction, right? And then, working with the business comes with its own set of challenges because you don't understand the business that well. So in a way, it's a vicious circle because, you have to figure out how to best apply the analytics, right? What we've been doing is we've been asking all our team members to participate in all discussions with the audit teams. So it doesn't matter whether, the DA group is required at that stage or not. We still make sure that we participate as a group on that audit engagement itself. So every bit of knowledge there that helps, right? What also happens is the incremental knowledge they get every time that they're on this discussion, it helps them eventually stitch their picture together when they are actually working on something, right? Or if they are actually trying to build a query, they're able to stitch the picture together to what the business needs and how the business works in a particular manner, right? I think this has really helped, I would say, my team and both auditors to figure out what analytics can do for them, and for us to learn the ropes around the business also very fast. So I think it's a win-win situation that we've at least had to some extent there.
Absolutely, I love that. It seems to be a theme that keeps occurring on my podcast recently, and I love that the win-win, that actually is a give and take, and that you guys aren't just going in and requiring loads of information or impressing on whatever processes it is that you need to work, but actually you taking away key learnings from the business side as well, which, as you say rather nicely, it's a win-win. Now, how have you been using automation to improve your auditing processes? Again, I know you have an interesting story to tell here.
Yeah, no, again, I think automation has been the recent, I would say, big trend within the last couple of years, right? I think it's opened up so many opportunities for different functions and different teams. Mm-hmm. Different. We realized that, there are ways to optimize our processes. And that's what, the small starter there has been. It's a small step that we took to realize what processes can be best optimized and automated in that manner, right? However, at the same time, I think I do mention that I think the biggest opportunity we believe is to provide continued assurance to the businesses. And I think, if you thought about audits being done every couple of years, instead of that, if you can use automation to run these audits pretty much when you desire, or even in real time, I think that's the piece where continuous auditing processes become very interesting then. And we've been having discussions within our industry peer group, and you could really see a high demand within internal audit teams to push in that direction, and everyone in the business sees the value around it. So I think that becomes just a big win for automation within the internal audit teams.
Absolutely, and I think it's one of those fantastic user cases of automation really, really empowering the business. I mean, the fact that you're able to make small changes in what you need to do consistently, as opposed to, as you say, in 2 years' time, realizing all of this has not been done correctly, and then you've got to do a huge pivot, a huge amount of work, and actually just pivoting ever so slightly really changes that direction of what you're doing, and as you say, it can only help with the wider departmental buy-in of utilizing analytics more effectively, because it makes life easier, and that at the end of the day is what people want, right? Is you want it to be easier for people to use.
Yeah, it's a small step at the moment, right? Which you say, okay, let's make processes easier and for people to understand what automation really could do, and then moving on to, a more wider adoption around automation, and then, going into the realms of intelligent automation is what I would say would be the core analytics segue.
Absolutely. Now, if you've been tuning into the Bob Pod for a while, you may be thinking back to a previous episode I did with Ricardo Rodriguez from Vauxhall. Now, he spoke about his experiences when he used to be in the auditing department, and very similar to you, Pranav, where he'd implemented analytics so successfully that the business was coming to him and requesting to be audited because the information was so strong. And it is a real pivot from, as I said earlier, the department of no, or the feared or the dreaded auditing, and it is that pivot. And I think you're building on that story, that actually successful use of analytics really does transform how a department is seen. Now, thinking a bit broader to other departments who perhaps haven't embraced analytics in the same way, what would your message be to them, or your thoughts on these experiences that you've had in auditing, to say, how can you embrace this? What would be your battle cry to get them on board?
It's an interesting piece that you mentioned. I think internal audit, at least to that extent, would, in the past would have been fair. I think that's really changing now. But this, what you mentioned is partly correct, because I don't think audit departments are the fair departments anymore, which they're considered more as our business partners. We use analytics. It has helped the auditors to further discover deeper insights, right? Like you mentioned, I think on departments actually coming back, or business departments coming back and saying, we really value the insights that are coming through, and how do you really make them, can they be provided on a continuous basis or not, right? But when you look at these deeper insights, you talk to the business, and the business realizes that there are times that they would have not really had the time or capacity to look at these as a part of their daily runs. In that context, analytics can help auditors to go back to the business and provide them with consulting advice, which I think is becoming, sort of an industry definition for what internal auditors should do, versus, then be the department that everyone fears.
Yeah, super. Now, when we caught up before, you were telling me how you're passionate that analytics not just be learned, but used in order for it to be really absorbed by the auditing department. You told me a rather sweet story about how this inspired you with your son as well. Yeah. I wonder if you could retell that story for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, no, like I mentioned, I think one of our big aim this year, or as a part of the goals, is really to make sure all auditors have the basic analytics skills, right? So as a part of that, we've been training auditors with basic Power BI skills for the last couple of years, and we've trained a fair number of our auditors onto that particular training skill set, right? The uptake around that has been great. Like, we've trained more people, but I still believe the efficiency to the use hasn't been there yet, right? And we realize that this is basically due to auditors not using this on a regular basis. And the example that I typically used to describe is that when I used to take out my son to learn a new skill every time, right? I mean, he'll learn it for a short time, he'll give up, and then forget about it, right? So, for example, in the summers, he joins a soccer camp every summer that he's going to play soccer there, right? And he plays there for like 3 months, and then Canadian winters are longer, so he doesn't play any soccer during the winters. And that's when next year, he's basically back at the same place where, he's still trying to learn what he learned last year, right? And that's what made me realize that, I think to an extent we are doing that too, right? We're training people with some skills that we train them now. They don't tend to use it, they tend to forget it, and then they're back again in the program. So I think just to make sure that, they're able to actually use this on a more active basis, is what we've been trying now. And we've been making sure that, they don't forget these skills, but it's like riding a bicycle. Eventually you'll still learn it and you'll still have that skill forever, but you've got to make sure you practice enough, or you ride your bicycle enough.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting, about training and then the wider data analytics environment is, if you ask any leader, you would never say that data or analytics or anything in it is a destination. It's always a journey. We're always talking about it as a constant evolution. But it makes me laugh that when we talk about data literacy, for example, as a skill, or analytics, we tend to think of it as a destination, but actually we ought to have that same approach of it being a journey and evolution, because as you've said so brilliantly there with your comparison with your son and the soccer club, it is exactly the same. If you have, say, 3 months of intense analytics course, of course by the end of it you're going to know how to run certain models quite quickly, or produce an analysis. You ask the same task 6 months time, if you've not done any of it, of course you're going to be scratching your head and thinking, oh, I'm not sure. And I think more departments and organizations need to have that realization that actually it needs to be that journey and drip fed in order for them to really understand it, as opposed to doing that kind of tick box, oh yeah, my team is trained on analytics, my team is trained on data.
Absolutely you're right. It's no different from any of our analytics teams too, right? Because we learn new skill sets every now and then. Until the time we're invested into those skill sets, that's great. But if we forget about them and you ask me to use something 2 years down the line, then I'm still going to be scratching my head.
Absolutely. And I can think of so many examples in our personal life as well that we're all going to be out of practice. Being, I think, the first real life event we all go to, we're all going to be running around going, where's the main stage? Where's reception? How do I log in? Because we're so used to
How do you really go back and talk in a big party, right? How do you make introductions?
It's all going to be a bit awkward. But anyway, last couple of questions before I let you get on with your day for now. What do you want to do over the next 12 months? Have you got a bit of a plan in front of you, or are you looking a bit short term? Because obviously I know that the pandemic is still going to be having an impact over this next year for many of us. So what do the next 12 months look like for you?
I think we have we have clear few strategic projects that we know that we're going to aim for. I think I did mention some of them before, but just to recapture, one of the biggest one is upskilling our audit teams. We want to make sure that they learn SQL and Python, and it's a good definition that we have in our mind. We want them at least to be mediocre. If you look at from the audit teams, they might think they're too advanced around it, but we still want them to learn at least running data queries in SQL and Python, right? We want to make sure that we're implementing a few pioneer continuous automation use cases. These will become as examples of what more can be done within the IA industry. So we want to focus on that. And at the same time, to keep the engine running, we want to make sure that we are focusing and automating some of the manual audit processes, so people still feel the value of automation, and that just sets them up on the whole analytics journey.
Amazing. Certainly an action-packed 12 months. Now, my last question to you, if you can sum up in one sentence, what would be the key message you want people to take away from this episode and get empowered, no matter what time? They might be listening with their breakfast, they might be listening with their evening cup of tea. So what would you want them to go away and think about after listening to this episode?
Yeah, no, that's good. I think, if I was doing that, I would really go back and say that data and analytics will impact. I think everyone knows it's really impacting every function. If someone thought that the internal audit group is not going to be using data analytics 3 years back, 4 years back, they probably know that, that's really changed over the last 4 years, and IA has become one of the most adopted users of analytics. Right? The other piece that's interesting is the ability to leverage analytics is now much more easier. So, if folks thought that, it's always about SQL and Python, sure it is, but there are also these sets of tools that a lot of folks can use, and a lot of businesses that might not have traditionally dealt with analytics can still use it. So I think they should be really looking forward to the use of analytics and try and embrace it, because I think that's the only way to go.
There we go. Wonderful. Well, as always, Pranav, it's lovely catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. I wish the best to your users and you, and I'll continue to join your podcast too.
There we go. Analytics and audit. What an interesting and innovative topic to discuss for certain. For me, I absolutely love the way that Pranav links that practical learning and use of the skills that his team have learnt in order to really understand them and apply them in future opportunities. As always, remember to subscribe to the Business of Data platform to keep up with all of the content that we produce, not just our podcasts. Also, remember, if you are listening on Apple or Spotify or any of the other wonderful podcasters, you're able to follow and subscribe here as well to allow you to keep up with every episode that we release. Do follow us on socials as well to engage with other thought leaders just like yourself. But for now, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time.